it was pure filth a lot of the time. It was, just all about sex and smut and, obscenity. So that was reflected in the content of the flyers.
I'm Kay Anderson, and you are listening to Lost Spaces, a podcast that mourns the death of queer nightlife. Every episode I talk to a different person about a venue from their past, the memories they created there, and the people that they used to know. Boogaloo Stu is the legendary promoter who reshapes nightlife with his distinctive take on mass culture, which is a light-hearted and irreverent approach that is nevertheless grounded in an obsessively detailed understanding of his source material. He was the host, DJ, producer, performer, everything else that you could imagine at Shinky Shonky, a club night which ran in a number of venues across London from the late 90s. We caught up to talk about Shinky Shonky as well as the Polar Bear, a bar in Soho, London, which hosted the night for a number of years from the turn of the century. So at Shinky Shonky, you performed as Boogaloo Stu.
Yeah.
Where did he come from?
Well, I suppose Boogaloo Stu was conceived probably when I was still at college. I would throw parties at college and I would DJ. And I didn't call myself Boogaloo Stu then, but I was dressing up and showing off. And then when I left college, actually, I should say, when my degree was in textile design, and for a year of my degree, I was lucky enough to go to New York, and I worked in New York for a year. And when I say worked, I did as little as possible in my job and spent all of my time going to clubs and partying and coming into work the next day and throwing up in the toilets and stuff like that. I was really, really badly behaved, basically. I can't believe I held a job down for as long as I did. But that year in New York, I was quite a shy person, really. I wasn't like a massive show-off unless I dressed up. But I would go to clubs and I observed a lot of amazing, amazing people like RuPaul, D-Light, Lady Miss Keir, Lady Bunny, Suzanne Barch, like all these, Diane Brill, all these kind of icons of New York nightlife in the late 80s, early 90s. And I was sort of seeing them all firsthand. I had a brief friendship with RuPaul where I styled him for a photo shoot. And I was kind of pretty much in awe of all of them. So they were really inspiring for me. And part of the inspiration was the fact that they were all really nice. They were really nice people. You get this, I don't know, up until that point, maybe I had this idea that to be sassy was more important to be a bitch, or like the idea of a bitchy drag queen or a bitchy celebrity or a bitchy haughty show off, and they were all really nice, friendly kind of people. So that was quite enlightening and inspiring. So I came back and I finished my degree, and then when I left, it just felt logical that I wouldn't get a job and that I would start, try putting on club nights. And that's what I did. And for ages, I didn't have the name Boogaloo Stu. I was just Stu. And then the club night was called Dynamite Boogaloo, which those two words are lifted from a song by Liquid Gold called Dance Yourself Dizzy. There's lyrics in there that are Dynamite and Boogaloo. And I don't even know why, but we chose to call it Dynamite Boogaloo because of that song. It's like it's a good disco record, and we did play it in the early days, but that's where the name came from. And then I don't know whether I'm just really stupid, but it took about a year, and it took someone else to point out that the club is called Dynamite Boogaloo. Why don't you call yourself Boogaloo Stu? I was like, yeah, that's a good idea. So that became my name. And again, the look was slowly evolving as well. Initially, I looked like I don't know, just covered myself in glue and fallen in a dressing up box. Like I looked like a dog's dinner, basically. And gradually it became a bit more polished and a bit more interesting and, individual.
Yeah.
And the quiff appeared, I don't know, probably about a year in, the quiff appeared and has never left. So it's like, yeah, that's how he sort of metamorphosed.
And so what would you say is the main difference between you and him?
Well, I'm quite shy. I'm quite quiet. I don't like to be noticed. And when I'm dressed up as Boogaloo Stu, I will talk to anyone and I'll say anything to anyone. Do you know what I mean? I've got no barrier.
Uh-huh.
I'm not sort of, yeah, it's just, I don't think we're wildly different. It's just the wig, for it is a wig, gives me
No, you've ruined the illusion.
it somehow gives me permission to show off. I don't know. It gives me more confidence being dressed up.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's fascinating, isn't it? Yeah, it's incredible.
Yeah. Well, I don't really work in clubs anymore. I'm still performing, but I don't really do much work. I don't DJ anymore, which kind of suits me in my advanced years, so that I'm not having to go out until 5 a.m. and stuff like that. So I've got a bit more of a social life now. Because even though I was doing club DJing and all that kind of stuff, it's surprisingly antisocial in terms of establishing a social life. Because obviously you're in a venue and you're DJing, making sure that people have a great time, but it's actually quite a sort of solitary existence. So yeah, I don't really do that anymore. I do lots of quizzes and bingo shows and theatre work and stuff like that. But I've managed to slowly extricate myself from nightclub work, which was drying up anyway, which I think is what we're going to talk about, I suppose, isn't it? How the sort of landscape of clubs and venues has changed over the past decade or 2 decades.
Yeah. It is currently a queer bar. It's the Q Bar in London. So why do you want to talk about it as the Polar Bear, and how is that distinct from the venue that it currently is?
I think, it was called, what was it called when I first started working there? It was West Central. It was West Central when I started working there. And that would be 1997, I think. And then it became the Polar Bear, and then it became Flip, and then it became West Central again. So it had sort of, during my tenure there, it had 4 different names, and then it was closed and became a straight pub, and then it became Q Bar. So that was a sort of lineage. And the name was never... Do you know, we were there the whole time, and there was all these new managers coming in and saying, oh, we're going to rebrand it as this and that. So we were the kind of constant, and it was the management team that kept changing. It was always owned by the same brewery, though, right up until I left. It was really just their sort of marketing strategy that meant they kept changing the name.
Ah, okay. That's odd.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the best way of putting it. And so then were you employed like on a freelance basis to run a night?
I started off doing Shinky Shonky at the Tube, which was later at the Ghetto. And we were on a Monday night there, and it was really difficult to get people to go out on a Monday night in any great number. So we were struggling. We were getting, 50 people a week at the Tube, which was okay. but I wanted to attract a bigger audience, and yeah, I wanted to get a better night basically, so that all my friends and people that wanted to come to the club who were working during the week or for whatever reason couldn't come out on a Monday night. So I found West Central, as it was then, they had Joe Egg doing a Friday night once a fortnight, and his night was called Pop Machine, and we took on the alternate Friday. So we were there once a fortnight, and the first night, the venue got absolutely trashed. The first night we were there, we had something like, the venue only held 150 people. It's really small down there, you probably remember. And the first night we were there, about 300 or 400 people turned up. Wow. Which took me by surprise. I mean, obviously they didn't all get in, but there was a big queue of people waiting to get in. And the venue just weren't prepared for it at all. They didn't have enough staff. So there was no one going around collecting glasses or anything like that. Like really basic things didn't get done. And by the end of the night, the floor was like a sea of broken glass. There was glass kind of packed up into the corners of the room, you know, like a kind of wave, like a pile of snow or something. It was ridiculous. People were kind of walking through all this broken glass, and it was absolute carnage. Do you know what I mean? The place was a mess. Like stuff had fallen off the walls, pipes had come off the walls and the toilets, water was pouring out of them. It was like an absolute mess, and they were just totally ill prepared for it because they were used to, I don't know, 50 or 60 people turning up for their Friday night or Saturday night gigs that they had on there. And I think Joe Egg was doing a really good job with Pop Machine, but he wasn't getting the same, he didn't have the same kind of opening night that we had, basically. Yeah. So from then on, they were kind of a bit more prepared for it, and they were excited that we were doing it because they knew we had an audience. So,
but you were invited back, so that's crucial.
Yeah. But we did wreck the venue the first night we were there. So, yeah, and then we continued sort of doing it in tandem with Joe Egg for about, I don't know, it was probably about 6 months or something, or maybe a year. And then Joe Egg, I can't remember why he stopped doing it. I don't know if he got a different venue, maybe. I think he moved his night to somewhere else. I can't remember. But anyway, the other Friday became available. So we ended up every Friday there. And we were there for about, I think we were there for about 6 years, maybe, something like that.
And so for those who don't know, can you tell us about what a typical Shinky Shonky night is?
Well, before I started Shinky Shonky, I was doing a night called Dynamite Boogaloo in Brighton, where the premise, when I started it, this is back in 1992 that Dynamite Boogaloo started, and it was always meant to be the sort of antidote to rave culture and to house music and the sort of bland, nondescript nature of dance music. Mm-hmm. So we played, the playlist was pop music and, radio edits and vintage disco and vintage indie tunes and kind of music that people can sing along to, kind of party anthems. That was the idea in terms of the playlist. And then combined with that, I wanted to put on a show, a bit of a cabaret, and have, just be really stupid, basically. I was sort of aware that I wanted people to get more out of the experience than just turning up, dancing and having a drink, getting off with someone. I wanted it to be more of an experience. Mm. So I'd been living in London for a few years by the time I started Shinky Shonky, and I wanted to do a similar thing to Dynamite Boogaloo, but do it in London. So that's why I started it. And the first couple of years that I did Shinky Shonky, it morphed into more than just music and cabaret. I was giving away badges, and we also had like all kinds of stuff that I'd go to Sainsbury's or the cheapest supermarkets I could find, or the cash and carry, and I'd bulk buy hula hoops. My freezer was absolutely full of mini milk lollies, and I'd have to get them in the height of summer from my house to the venue as quickly as possible before they melted. But we'd give away all this stuff. Like I'd go around with a big tray of hula hoops, and Jelly Belly jelly beans sponsored us for a while, so we had loads of little packets of jelly beans we give out, and And the badges, of course, as well, like badges for people. So people would have a slogan, an obscene slogan on their lapel for the evening, which would hopefully act as an icebreaker to Alex, you know. So it was more than just, you know, there was all these things going on simultaneously, and it was always a bit chaotic as well. But yeah, that was the basic. And we also had obviously my cabaret guests who, in the early days, it was pretty much Miss High Lit Kick every Friday or every Saturday with me. But then other people came into the fray as well. There was Princess Knickers, Le Gâteau Chocolat. We had the Incredible Tall Lady. There was various different characters who, you know, performed on stage with me. So yeah, it was like a little kind of cult of its own, I suppose, for a little while.
Okay, there's lots that I'm picking up on there that we need to talk a bit more about. First of all, the obscene badges.
Yes.
Tell me your favorite ones.
Well, in the early days, it kind of predates Photoshop and those kind of things. I was making badge designs out of Letraset and cutting out photographs of people from TV Quick magazine and things like that. So people who were in soaps like Dot Cotton or, you know, people from EastEnders, people from Coronation Street, or Richard and Judy, anyone like that were in these magazines, I'd cut them out and then I'd have a little speech bubble and then I'd Letraset an obscene phrase into the bubble. So
what is Letraset?
It's like, it's where you have a sheet of lettering and you rub them off onto the paper. Okay. So it's like typesetting, but manual typesetting. Wow. You know, it's like really old-fashioned. Yeah. So I'd make these badges, and I still got them somewhere actually. But I had sheets and sheets of them, like 11 badges on an A4 sheet, 11 designs that I'd done, and they were the most fun because they were very time-consuming, but they were kind of, there was a lot of love put into them. But they said things like, I don't know.
Is this false modesty here? Oh, I can't remember.
No, there's one that I had that sticks in my mind, which was a picture of a cat with a speech bubble coming out of its mouth, saying, "I require immediate clitoral stimulation." And that was a classic badge. Yeah, there was, you know, I'd buy a magazine like a nature magazine, so there'd be lots of animals on the badges as well with speech bubbles saying stupid things like that. But other than that, they might just say big hairy bollocks or massive cock or, you know, whatever, just for someone to wear and display that slogan. And over the years, I became familiar with how Photoshop worked. And so I would then, the designs became a little bit more polished. Those early designs were very sort of homespun. And I'd take them to be photocopied, color copied, and then I'd cut them out and make them. But more recently, they became more professional in their look.
That's a huge effort. So you were making like 50 badges a week, or?
No, more than that. I mean, sometimes I had to get people to help me. It depended, but I'd always try to make enough badges for the capacity of the venue. So I think it was 140 or 150, the Polar Bear capacity. So I'd make 140 badges every week.
And so I'd like to talk about some of the performers that you worked with. So a typical show, so it's kind of everyone's dancing, the music stops, you come on stage. Then what happens?
Well, I would always, you know, typically at Shinky Shonky, I would always sing a song. I'd sort of welcome the crowd and I would sing a song. I had a variety of songs. Casting my mind back to those days, I had there was the Boogaloo rap, which had a sort of, it was just obscene, basically, a load of smut. And then typical songs would be Born to be Wild, These Boots Are Made for Walking, The Girl from Ipanema, kind of weird sort of slightly jazzy standards that I'd found on old easy listening albums, like instrumental versions of them. So I would sing those. I also had a spinning wig medley, and I had a wig which had a sort of motorized thing on top, and I had a separate sort of wig section on top of the existing wig, which I had a little wire down my sleeve, and I could make the top of the wig spin. And I had this medley of songs that had spin in the title, like You Spin Me Round and Spinning Wheel, and things like that. So I'd sometimes do my spinning wig medley. And that was the opening of the show. Then I would introduce a special guest. Miss High Leg Kick would always come out. She had a sort of set piece of music that she would do her introduction to, and she'd allow her toe to peep through the curtain, a sexy leg would appear, and then she'd burst through and do a volley of leg kicks. And then we'd play a game of some sort, or we might have a sing-along, or both. We used to do sing-alongs to like Reach by S Club 7, That Don't Impress Me Much by Shania Twain, hits of the day, hits of that era, like the early noughties.
Yeah.
And I would rewrite the lyrics in an absolutely obscene fashion, and we'd have them printed up on big boards, and we'd hold up the board like verse by verse, and everyone would sing along. And that was really good fun. You know, it's hilarious that everyone's singing these obscene words to S Club 7 hits. So yeah, Miss High Leg Kick and I would duet, and Miss High Leg Kick is a terrible voice as well, but it's brilliantly terrible. So again, it was fantastic for people to hear her shrieking. And then we always had a game show at the end, which would involve some audience participation. Now, initially, again, when I was in my showbiz infancy, I would pick people at random to participate. Like sometimes we'd play musical Pass the Parcel or something like that, and the parcel would just go to anyone in the audience. And I kind of very quickly learned that it wasn't the fair way to do things, because some people are really shy, you know, obviously, and I don't want to embarrass people if they haven't volunteered to do something. So it didn't take me long to figure out that that wasn't really a good way to do it. So I don't know, within the first year of doing Shinky Shonky, it became about inviting people up onto the stage to participate. So you basically got people who wanted to join in,
or who were forced by their friends.
Yeah, or yeah, but generally it was done that way so that no one felt they were being picked on.
Yeah.
And we'd play. I mean, the games were usually messy. There was Penny Up the Crack. There was Shit Lips. There was Kiss the Chicken. Sniff My Panties.
Okay, break down the rules for these games for us, because
Right, okay, so Penny Up the Crack I still play when I'm doing my bingo games or whatever, bingo show. It's a really simple game where you have a penny clenched between your bum cheeks, and you start off at one side of the stage, and there's a pint glass at the other end of the stage, and you have to walk across the stage clenching the penny, and then you drop it in the glass. And we always had 2 or 3 rounds, and round 2 would be you had to repeat that process, but you had to use a pickled onion. And then round 3 would be repeating the process, but with an egg, with a raw egg. So it kind of became steadily, there was more jeopardy as the show went on, basically. And we'd often end up with eggs smashed on the stage, which was, you know, health and safety would have had a field day. Then we had Shit Lips, which was a sort of question and answer, a very arbitrary question and answer game, where the questions were complete nonsense. So the answer was completely like random. And people would have to say, oh, that's true or that's false. And if they got it right, they avoided Shit Lips. And if they got it wrong, they got Shit Lips, which was, you know, Nutella or chocolate mousse. In a big bowl, which would be brushed onto their face. So people would end up,
it wasn't lightly brushed.
Yes. And then Kiss the Chicken was a roast chicken on impaled on a leek, and quite often I would give it a face as well. It would have the roast chicken would have like eyes made of, well, a carrot nose, and whatever I could find, Brussels sprouts for eyes, sort of dress the chicken up so that it looked a bit more human. And again, it was like Shit Lips. It was question and answer, and if they got the answer right, they got to eat some chicken. So I'd hold the leek and they'd go in for a mouthful. And basically there was 2 chickens, a one for each contestant, and whoever had eaten the most chicken by the end of the contest was the winner. And I'm a vegetarian now, so I wouldn't do that game anymore. But yeah, it was fun. And then the chicken would speak as well. We had lots of little clips on CD that the DJ would cue. I'd sometimes point the mic to the chicken and there'd be something queued up the chicken would say. And then, what's the other game I just mentioned? Oh, Sniff My Panties. Asda used to sell really cheap multi-packs of knickers. So I'd go and buy like 10 pairs of women's knickers, 10 pairs of guys' pants, and we would soil the gussets of these knickers with all kinds of substances like piccalilli, Marmite, raspberry jam, custard, like whatever we could find that looked disgusting. And then people had to smell the pants and figure out what it was or taste it. Yeah.
just innocent fun.
Sometimes as the game would progress, we'd put the gusset over, like put the pants over their heads so the gusset was across their nose. Do you know what I mean? Like vertically over their nose and eyes. It depended how wild the show got, really, how up for it they were. And that's just reminded me of another game that we did actually, which was Blind Drunk, which was a kind of take on Blind Date, like Fuller's Blind Date. And we would blindfold contestants. They'd be put on a bar stool on stage, and we'd blindfold 2 contestants, and we'd give them things that they had to identify. Like the first thing would be something they had to touch. It would maybe be, I don't know, a chocolate bar or something, and they'd have to guess what it was from touching it. And then there'd be a fragrance, which was usually a really pungent air freshener. We'd spray a bit of air freshener, and they'd have to guess what the flavour was, the fragrance. And then as it progressed, they'd have to taste something. We were always careful to check if people had allergies or anything like that before we invited them on stage, because they never knew what they might be asked to eat in this particular game. So we then asked them they might eat a bit of chocolate or something, and they'd guess that it was chocolate. But then obviously they're blindfolded, so we would then bring out something that looked like a poo, but obviously it wasn't a poo, but it might be like a chocolate bar made squashed into the shape of a poo. And so the audience would be going, oh, no. And they'd be like, oh, it tastes like chocolate, And then the last thing we would do would be a condom washed, get all this sort of, the stuff they put on condoms, wash that off. There was a round before the condom, actually. Cat food. What I would do is I'd get, I'm letting you into trade secrets here, but I would get like Sheba cat food in a little foil tray, and I would very carefully peel the foil off, dispose of the cat food, wash the tray thoroughly, and I would replace it with mushroom pate or something like that. And I'd stick the foil back down with double-sided tape. So we'd bring them out and we'd peel the foil off, and it looked like it was just being opened. And inside there'd be this sort of pate-like substance that looked like cat food. So we would feed them pretend cat food. And again, the audience would just be absolutely horrified, like this can't be happening. But of course it wasn't happening. And the 2 contestants would be eating it. And then the final one, as I was saying, was condoms, which I would wash, and then I would put a little bit of yogurt in the tip of the condom. So it looked like a used condom. And we'd ask them to tip their head back and we'd squeeze the condom contents down onto their tongue. And it was just disgusting. And the audience would be like heaving by this point. And the contestants would be like, is that yogurt? So that was a good fun game.
From the sounds of things, it took you the whole week to prepare for that one night.
Yeah, it took up a lot of my time. At that time, I didn't have a lot of other things in my diary. I was still doing Dynamite Boogaloo in Brighton. I was DJing here and there, but my life was quite sort of, during the day, I was like, well, what am I going to do today? I didn't have a job or anything like that, a normal job. So that's what I would be spending my time doing, was devising ridiculous scenarios or making stupid props or costumes or whatever. I mean, thinking about it now, there was also quite often Miss Heilekic and I would do a sort of special routine of some sort that we've come up with. And there's two things that I can remember where we did a routine to Soldier, Soldier, oh soldier, soldier, will you marry me? This kind of traditional folk song type thing, which the lyrics are really stupid. And well, they're not stupid, but obviously I turned them into something completely stupid. And Miss Heilekic, we recorded her singing it really badly, and then she would mime the song. Soldier, soldier, will you marry me with your musket, fife and drum? And I would say, oh no, sweet maid, I cannot marry you, for I have an object up my bum. And I had this costume, which was it was a pair of trousers with a fake bum sewn into it. And they were like really big, baggy, flared trousers. And in the legs of the flares, I had all kinds of things that she would stick her hand into the bum, like a big bum hole at the back of this bum, and she would stick her hand in and she would pull out all kinds of like household implements, and it went on and on, like every verse. Oh no, sweet maid, I cannot marry you, for I have something up my bum. And the last thing that came out was a sort of full-size French baguette, which was right down one leg to my ankle, and people were like, oh my god, it's the whole baguette. And there was another, the song Pump Up the Jam?
Yeah.
We did a version of that called Pump Up My Balls, I had this costume that I'd made. It was flesh coloured, and it was covered in little pockets, this costume. And so it was meant to look like a skin tone bodysuit with lots of little pockets. And in the pockets, there were balloons with little plastic tubes attached, and tiny little corks in the end of each tube. And so I rewrote the lyrics to Pump Up the Jam as each verse was about a different body part being blown up. So the first bit was Pump Up My Wig, and I had this huge wig which had a balloon inside, and Miss Heilekic would blow up the balloon as I was singing the verse, so my hair would kind of grow. And then the next verse was Pump Up My Tits, and she'd go from side to side, and she'd blow up one tit, and then she'd blow up the next tit inside this costume. And then it was Pump Up My Ass, and she'd go around the back, and there was two balloons in each a balloon in each buttock. And so she'd blow those up. And then it was Pump Up My Balls. So again, there was two balloons, a balloon in each ball. So by this point, my costume is completely distorted, like ridiculously distorted. And then Pump Up My Cock, and she's blowing up my cock, but actually inside the cock I've got a turkey baster, which is filled with hand cream. And instead of her being able to blow up my cock, which obviously isn't something that normally is blown up, it explodes in her face. The hand creams, I ejaculate in her face. So we would do that. We would do the Soldier, Soldier. There was another brilliant act that we did for Fran, where Miss Heilekic, where she was. I made this costume again. It had a fake bum and fake tits in it, and it was kind of like a strip routine. But she was dressed as an old lady, and the tits were stitched into this like old 70s house coat, and the bum was stitched on the back. And in the bum, again, there was loads of objects, like a really, really long string of like silk handkerchiefs tied together that just went on forever and ever. And in the tits, what I'd done is I cut out the nipples, and in the tits there was 8 raw sausages in each tit. And the tip of the sausage, when she came on stage, it just looked like the nipple. But then she, during this little strip routine, she would pull the sausage out and the whole string of sausage would come out of her tits. I mean, it was really, really, really stupid. I don't even know how I came up with it. Do you know what I mean? It's like, and throwing raw sausages around on stage, it's like so not suitable for health and safety nowadays. So, yeah, so again, I would spend my week thinking about those things, like,
what can I pull out of my butt this week?
Yeah, because I was also aware that we had lots of regulars, and we did repeat stuff. We did do stuff more than once, but I was also aware that I didn't want people to turn up and see the same thing every week. So I was always thinking, well, what could we do this week that is different? So that was it. We would lip sync to adverts a lot as well. Adverts that were on the TV. We had various favourites that, again, had been doctored. We dubbed stuff over it to make it more obscene than it was, or whatever. And we had props, and so it was kind of fertile for. It was a real sort of fertile period for smut, thinking up, the most ridiculous smutty things that we could do. It was good fun.
And so in amongst all of that, Miss High Leg Kick was your ride or die then, and she just went along with everything, or was she providing her own smut?
She's got naturally good comic timing, and we would get together to come up with some of it. We'd sort of work on things together. So it wasn't just me on my own. It sometimes was, but sometimes she would come round and we'd go, what are we going to do? We've got to think of something for this Saturday or this Friday or whatever. And we were also, simultaneously, we were doing performances at Ducky. So we I don't know why, but we'd always put in an extra special effort to do a show for Ducky. And then sometimes from the stuff we did at Ducky, other ideas would kind of follow on, and we'd end up doing those at Shinky Shonky. So she was a regular for the first, 6 years of Shinky Shonky, from 97 to maybe early noughties. And then gradually other people started coming in and doing occasional Fridays, and Princess Knickers and the Incredible Tall Lady, the Gâteau Chocolat. There was various other guests that started doing bits and bobs. So yeah, it was good.
And so how did you meet these new people? Were they just regulars of the club that then started performing, or?
Princess Knickers was a regular at the club, basically, and she was always flashing her knickers at me, and they always had a little sparkly word done in gemstones, like twat or minge or slit. And I was like, ooh. And then she was like, she said, I could do a striptease for you. And I was like, okay. So she became like a kind of house regular who would join me in the same format, where we would do lots of messy game shows, and she would do a little burlesque style routine. Again, Princess Knickers had a more interesting take on, what she did wasn't really burlesque. That does it a disservice to call it that, because I think people now have a particular idea of what that means. But then she was taking her clothes off, but she was doing things that were like either really stupid or really kind of innovative. Like she had one routine that was where she hoovered her clothes off. She had a hoover, and like all her bra and knickers and various other items of clothing would be hoovered off. They would kind of come off and disappear into the hoover. So there was kind of more to her than just being a sort of burlesque girl. And the Incredible Tall Lady, again, just another friend who was, a show off, a really big show off. So it was the natural place for her to be on stage with us, again doing the same kind of thing, just joining in with the game shows and doing little sketches with us and stuff like that. So and Legato, I'm not sure actually if Legato started doing stuff with me after we left, and it came because we ended up going back there doing Shinky Shonky for, I don't know, was it be 3 years maybe, for a Q bar, but it was on a Wednesday by that point. They offered us the Wednesday, and Q bar is a very different kind of venue. It didn't, in retrospect, I'm surprised I lasted as long as I did there, because it was very much, Shinky Shonky was a fish out of water in that space. I kind of appreciate what they do. You know, they've got their market, but it's a very young kind of Twinkie market at Q Bar, and it didn't fit with the kind of ethos that we built up around Shinky Shonky. You know, the regular following that we had aren't the kind of people that would go to Q Bar really. So we struggled a bit there, and we eventually left.
but isn't that kind of incredible that you were in the exact same building and you had built up a number of followers over the years, or regulars over the years, and suddenly, because of new management, the vibe was different and it didn't work?
Yeah. I mean, it basically was like a completely different space. You know, it wasn't the same. It wasn't the same brewery. There was nothing connected apart from it being the same building. And obviously, it was still an LGBT-led company.
Yeah.
But beyond that, there really wasn't much connection. So, yeah, it was quite odd.
Yeah, it's just really fascinating. And so you talked about the Q Bar's kind of target audience, or its niche being a younger clientele, Twinkie. How does that differ from who was going to Shinky Shonky?
Shinky Shonky was a real mixture of people. It was a mixture of it was a mixture of gay and straight. You know, it was a mixture of gay, lesbian, straight, queer. A mixture of ages. There was a bit of a bear following. There was a lot of lesbians that came. It was a real mixture of people. It's a broad brushstroke of students and kind of arty types, and you know, it was just. And also, Soho was a much more vibrant place than it is. Well, I mean, so there's stuff going on in Soho, but there was much more to bring you into Soho than there is now, I would say.
Can you expand on that?
Well, I think you had the Astoria, you had Ghetto, you had Polar Bear. Retro Bar is still there, but there was lots of other little bars, Barracuda. I'm trying to think of some. Oh, there was what's it called? Trash Palace. There was Freedom Bar. I'm just trying to think of some of the other places that were around there. And beyond those places that I've just mentioned, which are specifically LGBT-led venues, Candy Bar as well, there was also lots of straight clubs, you know, Samaritz, or what's that little one that was under the Arches? It's in the basement in the Arches. I can't remember the name of it now. I think it was Gossips. There were loads of clubs, basically. Eve's Club on Regent Street, and then later on it was on Burlington Street. Like loads of venues, and one by one they'd sort of been picked off and turned into flats or shops or chain restaurants or whatever. And there isn't much to draw people into the West End anymore. But then, also the way licensing was in those 2 decades, people would go. It was kind of like there was a routine to your night. You would go to the retro. A lot of our regulars went to the Retro Bar to start with. They would have a drink at the Retro Bar until about 10. And then at 10:30, they knew they had to get in the queue at Shinky Shonky or they might not get in. So Retro Bar would be closing at 11 anyway. So they'd leave Retro Bar at 10:30, walk up to Lyle Street to West Central Polar Bear. And we opened at 10. And by 10:30, there could be a really big queue. At its peak, we'd always have a queue by that time. So there was this kind of routine that people knew they had to get there on time, and then they get into the club, they get a drink, the cabaret would be at 12:30, and then dancing till 3 a.m. And that was the sort of routine. But then when the licensing laws changed in 2008, that all went a bit pear-shaped for clubs and venues. And also it was simultaneously scuppered by the smoking ban, which it was like the same year those two things happened. And suddenly loads of clubs had to stop charging, so promoters didn't make any money anymore because all the venues were going, oh, well, it's free entry tonight, because everyone was staying in the pub beer garden until 2 a.m. instead of thinking, oh, we need to go to a club at 11 or there'll be nowhere open. So it all changed around that time. And I don't lament it particularly. I think it's a good thing that people aren't smoking in clubs, for one thing. And I also think it's a good thing that you can get a bloody drink in a pub past 11 o'clock. Yeah. But it definitely did affect clubs and businesses, and it's pretty much why I ended up moving out of that industry. I think I was ready to leave it anyway. DJing and that sort of world. I was ready for a different challenge, and also, as I say, I didn't want to be DJing till 5 a.m. on a Saturday night. I kind of thought I want my social life back. So yeah, it did all change around that time. But to go back to the original point, which was about Q Bar and how their audience are very different, I think it's just one of those things where they've taken on that new space, and I think their demographic is a much younger audience, and they're the people who go into the West End. They go to Q Bar, they go to Circa, and they go to Heaven and places like that. The more interesting arty types are going out in the East End, like Dalston Superstore or wherever, those kind of venues. Or maybe not going out at all, or maybe living somewhere else like Margate. It's like everything is shifted and fractured. So there's not, like, Soho isn't the epicenter of kind of all types of queer culture anymore that it once was. And it's all kind of dissipated now. So, I think there's still, you've got the Admiral Duncan, Compton's, places like that on Compton Street that still cater for different age groups and different types of people and what have you. So of course it's still there, but it's kind of marginalized a little bit. I think it's much smaller scale than it was.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, it's probably part of getting older, but I can't imagine myself going into central London every weekend anymore.
No,
and it used to just be like, well, of course that's where you go. And now it's like, oh God, I've got to go on the bus, and then I've got to do this, and then
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, there's nothing that would draw me into the West End, really. I've been to the theatre in the West End. The theatres are still standing, but it's like. Most of the big clubs that were in the West End have gone. I think that the death knell was when the Astoria was pulled down, and that whole block. There was a Metro Club, there was Ghetto, and there was the Astoria, and then across the road, not so far away, there was the End, and there was another club that was directly across the road, next to Centre Point. I can't remember the name of it, but they've all gone. And there was also Million Dollar Babes, which was in the basement of the YMCA on Tottenham Court Road.
Oh, really?
There was loads of clubs around there. There was loads of stuff, and it's gone. There's little places, little quirky places that you might still discover, but there's no big kind of club culture in Soho or nearby anymore.
Yeah. Do you remember the last event that you ran at that venue?
I vaguely do. I remember getting a letter from the venue, from the head office people at Mitchells and Butler, thanking me, like saying thank you so much for I don't know, it was 8 or 9 years of successful promotion and what have you, which was really nice. I was actually quite touched by that because normally you just think, oh, they don't give a shit.
Yeah.
But and then I kind of remember. I mean, I remember it being really, really packed, and we did have a lot of people queuing to get in that couldn't get in and stuff like that. I don't remember. I've got no idea what we did or anything like that. But I do remember we already had a new venue lined up, which was in Stoke Newington, miles away. But the Oak Bar, and we were going to go monthly there, and we did that for, I don't know, 3 years maybe. We were monthly at the Oak Bar, and it was good fun up there actually. But it was a struggle to promote it because it wasn't nearly as easy as it had been in the West End.
Yeah.
But because we had this new, because it wasn't stopping dead, it didn't feel like the end of an era or anything like that. So I don't have specific memories of it finishing at that venue. I can't really remember. So there you go.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that makes sense. And so then looking back, what's the thing you miss most?
I don't know. I don't know if I missed it at all, actually.
Why are we having this conversation?
I miss the kind of atmosphere of it, I suppose. The kind of it was hedonistic, but without any drugs or too much alcohol or anything like that. Because again, that was something that we just didn't do. It was boozy at Shinky Shonky, but that was it really. I wasn't. If people were on drugs, I wasn't aware of it. So yeah, I kind of miss that sort of slightly hedonistic. Looking back, it's part of my misspent youth really, promoting and performing there. So I've got fond memories of it, like all these things that I've been talking to you about, these ridiculous costumes that I would spend days making, to do a lip sync or a version of a song with inflatable boobs or whatever it was, that was a lot of fun, like putting all that together and, working with Miss Highlight and the other special guests. We were all at the beginning of our career. We've all gone off in different directions and done totally different things, but it was good fun doing all that. So, yeah, I suppose. And also the DJs. I mean, I wasn't the only DJ at Shinky Shonky. There was, we started off with Newton and Ridley as guest DJs, who were a sort of duo, and then one of them, which is named after the brewery in Coronation Street, is called Newton and Ridley. And we lost Newton. He left the ranks, so we were left with Ridley, his DJ name is Albert Twatlock, and Albert Twatlock is still a very good friend of mine, and he still DJs now and again for other people. But he had a big part to play in shaping the kind of music that we played, bringing in sort of more left field indie tunes, or he always had promo copies of brilliant new pop stuff as well ahead of anyone else.
So give me some examples of the songs.
Well, he first played the clapping song, the version by Anita Harris, which is an absolute staple of Shinky Shonky. It's like an absolute classic. If it's not played, then it hasn't been Shinky Shonky. It's like, you might be familiar with the Shirley Ellis version, but you haven't lived until you danced to the Anita Harris version. It's so much more jazzy and beefy and danceable, it's brilliant. It's an amazing. So he introduced that. He would play things like Stereolab and bands like that who were a bit more left field, but people actually did want to hear. So there was a kind of, it was interesting what he brought in terms of musical choices. And I remember there was one night, this wasn't him actually, this was me. I had been sent a promo of the Sugar Babes' Freak Like Me, which was like a mashup of Adina Howard, Freak Like Me, and Gary Newman, Our Friends Electric.
Yeah.
And it went on to be like a massive number one.
Yeah.
And I got this like CDR sent from a promotions company of this Sugar Babes new single, and I was playing it, and Richard X, who actually produced it, was there.
Oh wow!
And he leant over the DJ decks and he said to me, "Where did you get this?" And I was like, "Oh, I sent it." And he was like, "I haven't even heard this," and he hadn't heard the finished mix, and I was playing it. And I think he was a bit annoyed because they tweaked the drums and stuff or something. He was like complaining about it, but but yeah, you know. So we were always interested in playing new, brilliant pop stuff. So there was a big part of it that was about, like, you know, I remember Ooh La La by Goldfrapp. We had that weeks ahead of it coming out, and we were playing that all the time because it was just so brilliant. It just sounded so completely different to anything else in the chart. And people would always, you'd play it and people would be coming up going, who's this? Who's this? You know, so we had that kind of, we were excited about new music, but we also loved all, from the 60s through to the 90s, whatever, like kind of cheesy, interesting, disco, easy listening, whatever it was, you know. So there was a real mixture of that. But I think Albert Twatlock really helped to fine tune and helped us find an identity that was different to rival clubs like Pop Stars or Ducky or any of those other, you know, Vaseline. Was it Vaseline? Garage? Yeah. Okay. Anyway, you know, it was kind of, it set it apart.
Yeah.
It gave it its own identity, and I think that was largely down to him.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, the one thing I would take away from that time and going to that night is the, you know, down from the music and the performance and the whole vibe is just that complete lack of pretension. It's just like, do we enjoy this? Yes, then let's do it, rather than, oh, what does NME say about this? Or
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
So one of the questions that I had was, obviously, like, throwing a club night, having a gig, doing any of those types of things is like throwing a birthday party and being terrified that no one's going to come. And then kind of being on tenterhooks all night, trying to like make sure that everyone's having a good time and make sure that if anyone's annoyed or pissed off that you're attending to them. Was that kind of the thing that happened to you when you were there, or did you like, were you able to have like fun and just relax at any time?
Yeah, I always managed to have fun. Sometimes it could be stressful sometimes, but usually only if something had gone badly wrong. Mm-hmm. Like on occasion, the power would go down in Soho. We had power cuts. There was occasions when, you know, people couldn't get in that really needed to get in, or there was never any trouble, but there might be really drunk people who needed to be ejected, or some nights it was really quiet. Like bank holidays were notorious. Brighton Pride weekend was notorious, and it would just be empty. And I would kind of think it's really not worth actually bothering, you know. But we'd like have like 50 people rattling around, wondering where everyone was. But it never bothered me because I was largely always prepared for it, I suppose. There was occasions when people were caught having sex. That wasn't particularly upsetting for me. But they would have to be ejected, obviously, you know.
Ejected. Good choice of word.
Yeah, it was largely, it was fairly stress-free. I mean, what I realise now, having sort of for the past 10 years, I've been doing, you know, devising theatre shows and touring with them, as well as sort of running my quiz nights and what have you. And what I've learned is that actually what I was doing then, I was a DJ, I was a promoter, and I was also a producer. Now you'd kind of separate all those out. You'd have 3 people doing those jobs, and I was doing them all. I would turn up at like 8:30, 9 o'clock at the venue, and I would put the glitter curtain up, and I'd sort the stage out, and I'd put all the prizes backstage, and I'd make sure the lights were working, the stage lights, and do you know what I mean? It was like I was doing all the kind of prep, as well as making costumes and preparing show tapes, because we were using tapes then as well, like cassette tapes.
Yes, yeah.
So I'd be editing show tapes. I'd basically be doing all the jobs that a show producer would normally do.
Filling the condoms with yogurt as well.
Yeah, I'd be doing all of that, preparing the knickers for Sniff My Panties. And then I'd do a DJ set, and then I'd do the cabaret, and then I might do a bit more DJing afterwards. And if I wasn't doing that, then I was walking around the club giving out badges and jelly beans and all that kind of stuff. I must tell you about the jelly beans, actually. This is a good story.
Go on.
Because we had sponsorship from Jelly Belly jelly beans, which were really delicious, obviously. And the woman who was the PR for jelly beans, for Jelly Belly, was this really lovely lady called Victoria. And she's very posh. And I spoke to her quite a few times on the phone. She's like, yes, I'll send you 10 boxes this quarter. And I was like, okay, yeah, we can make that work. And she always said, in return, she needs to see some publicity with their logo on it and what have you. So I was always very mindful to send her flyers and what have you with their logo displayed, and maybe a little tagline saying sponsored by Jelly Belly. And of course, some of the flyers were a bit fruity. And I'd say to her, some of the flyers have got rude words on them and what. And she said, no, don't worry. I won't let my bosses see them, what have you. So I remember I sent her a bunch of flyers. We had loads of flyers done, particularly when it was fortnightly. There was like a different flyer for every single party, every fortnight. But anyway, I amassed a load of flyers to send her this particular time. And one of the flyers had an image of a couple doing massage. And the guy was lying on his front with nothing on, and the woman was kneading his buttock with her fist. And I mean, she wasn't fisting him, don't get me wrong, but she was kneading his buttock. So her clenched fist was kind of quite close to his bumhole, I suppose, if you want to look at it that way. And that was the reason I used the photograph, because it looked vaguely obscene. And obviously it had lots of text over it and what have you, and silly words and speech bubbles and things like that. It was the same style of design as the badges. And obviously in the bottom corner there was a little Jelly Belly logo and what have you. So I sent her all these flyers, and this was in amongst them. And she had left them on her desk at work, and her bosses had discovered these flyers, and I didn't hear from her for about 2 months, and I wondered what was going on. And basically, she nearly lost her job over that flyer. Eventually she called me and she said, "Oh my goodness, it's been absolutely terrible. I'm afraid we won't be able to sponsor you again." So it was the end of the sponsorship deal.
Oh, but did you then go to Crisco or some other kind of?
No, I think I vaguely tried. No, I didn't. I don't know what I used instead, but I just bought pick and mix or whatever kind of lollies and things like that from the cash and carry. But she was really upset, and apparently it had been really bad at work for her because of that. It's my fault. So
if she's going to leave it out on her desk, I think that's on her.
Well, yeah, I mean, she kind of knew she shouldn't have. I remember she was apologising to me, saying, I should have made sure that they weren't anywhere to be seen, or they should have gone in the bin or whatever. And I was like, look, it's as much my fault, really. I shouldn't have been taking liberties with your brand, to some degree. It's like I should have had a bit more respect for the fact that you were sponsoring it, and I could have kept the flyers a bit cleaner, So yeah, there it is. the flyers were obscene. A lot of them were absolute filth, you know.
Yeah, well, I mean, you've got to like promote your night in an accurate way.
Yeah. And I mean, the night was filth. You know, it was pure filth a lot of the time. It was you know, just all about sex and smut and you know, obscenity. So that was reflected in the content of the flyers.
Yeah, people know what they're getting themselves in for.
Yeah.
Did you ever go to Shinky Shonky at the Polar Bear? Well, if you did, I would love to hear from you. Please share your stories and any photos that you may have from that time through social media. You can find me on all platforms with the username KAndersonMusic. Lost Spaces is not only a podcast, but a concept record as well. I've been writing songs about queer venues and things that happened within them and the people who lived their lives there, and we'll be releasing songs over the next year. You can hear the first single, Well Groomed Boys, which is also playing underneath my talking right this very second, on all streaming platforms. If you enjoyed this episode, I would really appreciate if you subscribe to the podcast, leave a review on the iTunes store, or failing all of that, just tell someone who you think might be interested in hearing the story. I'm Kay Anderson, and you have been listening to Lost Spaces.